This is Green Farm in Wiltshire, and it's time for the annual shearing to begin. There was a time when the farmer and his workers would do the shearing themselves, but in these days when time is money, it is easier and quicker to call on the services of people like Chris Farnsworth. It takes skill to shear a sheep, and Chris can shear one in about 4 minutes on average. Most shearers travel the country going from farm to farm. It's a young man's game and can be back-breaking work. Because of this, less young people are taking it up, and it gets harder for farmers as there aren't enough skilled shearers to go round.
Always take the belly off first. And this hand pulls the skin up tight so that we don't cut it in the blade. So both hands work as hard as the other one. Round the bottom. Round the leg. Again, I use the left hand to push the animal so it stays nice and tight. Round the bottom, and then we turn it right round, up the neck, and flip it over the top. Then up the other side, and then right up to the back of the neck. So here's this shoulder, and then we lie it down and do the long strokes. These are generally the fastest strokes. Ooh, if you'll just sit still. Getting your feet in the right place. All that dirt is in the winter where it gets washed down into the wool, onto the skin. It does irritate the sheep, that's why in the spring you see a lot of them on their backs, trying to get rid of that irritation. The lanolin, which is the yellow in the wool, tries to help waterproof the coat and keep the dirt out. But obviously where it's flat on the back it has a harder job. Take the wool away.
The fleece is laid out, folded and then neatly rolled up. The neck wool is twisted and then tucked in to hold it all together. Each fleece can weigh about 3 or 4 pounds, which is about 1 to 2 kilos.
We wear special trousers, they're actually double lined because the lanolin, being unrefined and raw, can cause irritation to the skin where you get hot, and it goes right through the denim. So there's 2 layers of denim in the front of the trousers, and just here it goes back to a single layer. So this is double, all of this is double. It's great. If you get a hole in the front layer, it doesn't matter, there's another layer underneath.
I've been farming here all my life. I was born at this farm. My father was here before me, and it's been in my family since 1846. And I've never lived anywhere else apart from here. And I started farming here when I was 17.
Shearing for about 10 years, and hopefully it'll be for another 10. I was born and bred in London actually, and I've always wanted to be a farmer. And the only way I can be a farmer is purely by doing other people's sheep. I have my own sheep as well, but it was a childhood dream really to just become a farmer. But I enjoy the shearing. It's good, keeps you fit. It provides an income, and yeah, it's good fun. Meet some nice people. It's very seasonal. That's the trouble. I shear for about 8 weeks in all, but when it rains, of course, and if the sheep aren't shut in, I have to stop. So, but I always have my own work to do, you know, for my own sheep as well as you know, everybody else's to do. But it is a bit hit and miss sometimes, you know. Hence the mobile phone, and sometimes it gets quite fraught, you know, whether it's raining in some places and not in others, you know. So it takes a bit of organisation, really. Harness is relatively new. It's come out in the last about 5 years, and you put it on. It just takes the weight of your head, really. When you're bent down like that, your head's a heavy weight, and I reckon by using that spring, I mean, I'll be putting another 50 sheep on my tally, because you just run straight into the pen for the next one. It just takes that backache out. It doesn't stop backache, but it just like a prevention. There's several backaches, but it just takes the strain off your back.
It is compressed by standing on it. It's surprising how much you can get into a sack by doing this. When it's full, it is sewn up. This is always traditionally done by the women.
Oh gosh, their hygiene isn't very good.
The wool off these sheep will go to make carpets or blankets. When all sheep are sheared, the contract will be called to arrange collection. Wooden barrels are still made the way they've always been made, by hand. It takes a long apprenticeship to become a qualified cooper.
First job of the cooper is to list the shape or shape them. We do that using the cooper's axe, which is offset so we don't damage any digit. Roughly find the centre of the stave.
The first job is to shape the wood that makes the sides of the barrels. These are called staves. Most of what a cooper does is measured by eye. The staves, even at this early stage, take on the curve of the barrel.
Yeah, a 16-year-old apprentice, and whether you're making new ones or remades, you use the same hoop so that you get the shape of your casks and also the sizing of your cask perfect. I'm just finishing putting the hoop around the bottom. Once we've got the cask to this stage, the next thing is to make sure that the size of the cask is going to be correct. So I've already put a chalk line round where the rebate for the lids is going to fit, and using a stick with a piece of nail in it will now get the capacity of the cask. I'm aiming for the capacity of the cask to be between 18 gallon 1 and 18 gallon 3 pints. In true Yorkshire style, look at about 18.2, and then you can't go wrong, because at this stage it can be anything up to half a pint out. And watching where the stick falls against the chalk line in 4 to 6 places actually gives you the size of the cask. As it is now, it's sitting on the line, and as that is all the way around, sits like that, the cask is 18 gallon 2 pints.
Once Alistair is happy with the size of the barrel, it is taken to be steamed. Here it will stay for 40 minutes. The steam makes the wood soft and pliable. Meanwhile, Alistair gets on with the making of the lids, or heads.
Because the heads are made of different pieces of timber, we actually dowel the heads together with just standard 2-inch chairmaker's dowels. We knock the dowels into the holes we've just made.
Before the pieces are joined together, a length of Norfolk reed is sandwiched in between. When wet with the beer, it swells to make a watertight seal. The head is roughly cut out on the bandsaw. By this time, the barrel is ready for the next process. Now that the wood is hot and supple, it can be bent into shape using a device specially designed at the brewery.
Works in everything's in all. Pounds, shillings and pence for wages, inches for measurements, and obviously for capacity, gallons. We don't use any of that metric rubbish. You see now, keep a tight hold of it with your left hand. Knock the base over.
The many tools in coopering have changed very little over the centuries. All have evolved to be perfect for the job they are meant to do. Now that the grooves are cut into each end, the heads have to be cut to fit.
Rooney, News, Tres, Cap, Sank. This is perfect.
A good eye and plenty of experience are essential. Cut too much off and you will have to start again.
This is a finished lid, as you can see. The next thing now is to pop it into the cask. So we do that by loosening the hoops. There's my mark into another cask that'll last another 80 years.
There you are. Easy when you know how. Earlier in the series, we saw how Brian Bailey and his team went about ringing gulls on a rubbish tip near Gloucester. And if you remember, Brian used a cannon net, which was first pioneered by Sir Peter Scott at Slimbridge, for catching and ringing of wild geese. The leg ringing of wild birds goes on all over the country, and it provides vital information on the state of wild bird species within the British Isles. Now, many different methods for catching birds have been devised, and we'll see when it comes to catching swans, Dave Stone takes the slow, quiet approach. This is the beautiful River Wiley. It's one of the many rivers Dave Stone visits at this time of year. His helpers are all volunteers and are here to ring the local mute swan population.
While my colleagues finish putting the pen up, I'm going down with one helper, and we'll be driving the swans upriver. Later on you'll see them come round the bend here and hopefully straight into the pen.
Start with, get them to go up to the other side.
Ringing swans in this way provides information on the population around the country, and Dave and his team love to do it.
The long poles, two of us will have them in the river to help guide the swans into the pen, and then we would need one at the back here to add some support to the back of the actual pen because it's a bit loose on the netting here, and if they try to force their way through, it'll give us something for them to push against, and that one can come out. These are all coming up from down the bottom, upriver from over here. Two of us will be over in the river, just up there with poles. That'll be Robert and myself. If everyone else could, or two others could go in the bushes over here, and then as the swans come up, make sure they don't try and land on the beach here, but keep into the river and go into the opening there. So they'll have to come in behind them. Then when they're sort of just beyond the net, we'll come forward and try and push them all in.
Most of the birds stay within the river system. They'll move up and down between Warminster and Wilton, and occasionally some will go over onto the Avon above Salisbury. The vast bulk stay within the river system, but just occasionally a small percentage will go quite some distance, and in recent years there's been about half a dozen in France, quite south in France, so they are capable of flying. Once they've finished the molt and start stretching their wings, they are capable of flying big distances, but most of them will remain on the river, generally near where they were hatched out.
The swans have been driven along the river and they're just coming in now to the pen which we've erected. Coming in very well actually.
Once the birds are in the pen, we're checking the ring numbers of the birds that are already ringed and are putting rings on the birds that don't currently have rings. Most of those will be young birds of last year. Most of the older birds and breeding birds have already got rings on in this area. So from the rings, for the rest of the year, we're able to read the ring numbers without having to catch the birds. The roundup went very well. Since I've been doing this since 1974, they never seem to get the hang of what's going on. They keep coming back year after year. They have these traditional areas where they molt. They were being completely flightless. They're at risk from foxes and so on, and they tend to pick an area where they're going to be fairly safe. Obviously, because they can't fly to move to fresh food sources, so they have to come to an area of the river where there's plenty of weed in the river. But unfortunately, as the season progresses, they gradually eat the weed, which annoys the fishermen. As they eat the weed, the water level drops, which isn't so good for the fishing or for the general ecology of the river. So although they're beautiful birds, they do cause these sort of ecological problems, particularly when they're in high numbers.
How you do it?
Okay. The flight feathers are just beginning to grow. There's a quill here full of blood. It's pumping blood into these new feathers, and they'll eventually get out to about this length. So at the moment the wings are fairly vulnerable, so that's why the birds aren't aggressive towards us. They're looking after their wings, and we have to be careful with them as well. Okay. Rings are glued on so they don't slide up or down the leg. We just temporarily hold it with some biodegradable sticky plastic. The metal ring, Tom, is U1424. This has a serial number on. Again, each ring is different. There is also the address of the British Museum, London Southwest 7 on it, so that if people find a bird dead, then they do report it. And being such an obvious bird, large numbers do get reported.
JKK.
Of the ring birds, or of the swans in general, about 20% of the breeding birds die each year, and so their territories are taken over by new birds from the molting flock in the following year. Of the younger birds, about 30% tend to disappear each year. So they're in the advantageous position. The older they get, the more likely they are to survive. And I just wish that was the case with humans.
So this is last year's cygnet. It's got some white feathers, and in a few weeks' time, when it's finished moulting, that'll be pure white. So it'll moult all these brown ones out. So it'll then be aged as a 6, which means it's an adult. So if you look at the cygnets on the rivers now, they're all completely brown. Then they do a post-juvenile molt where they go whitish with brown feathers like this, and then the following year when they molt, they lose all their brown feathers completely, and they'll be a pure white bird. When they used to breed the swans at places like Abbotsbury, and when they used to be sort of eaten at banquets, they used to sort of breed them. They used to kill the juveniles to eat, and the old ones kept as breeding stock. The youngsters, of course, being a bit juicier than the old boots of the adults. Some of these can be quite tough. You have to give them a bend to start them off, and you have to make sure that the ends are closed, so that should they get caught in fishing wire, it doesn't go up into the ring itself. That's completely closed now.
Happens every time. But fortunately I can wash it off instantly, otherwise I don't think we'll be having lunch in the pub.
Okay, well done chaps, that was 23 birds, 100% success there. Off to the next group, if you don't want lunch first.
I can't think of a better way to spend a summer's day.